I'm bringing our panel of political strategists this afternoon, Grahame Morris and Bruce Hawker. A very good afternoon to both of you. Can I just get your thoughts, Grahame, on this breaking news out of South Australia? The state Liberals there have decided to block the bank levy that was announced in the recent budget.
The last time the Liberal Party knocked off a Labor government, so Liberal Party in opposition knocked off a Labor government, I ran the campaign about 24 years ago. The whole campaign was based on the collapse of the state bank. And the theme was enough's enough and never again. And here we are, 24 years later. The Labor Party again is doing strange things to a bank that are unique to that state at a time when the state's in terrible, terrible trouble. And they ought to be encouraging, sort of cutting taxes and everything so that people go to that state. At the moment, there's a big back door that says exit in South Australia, and this state tax, a one-off tax in South Australia, not going to help.
Well, I think it applies to all of the big banks, at least, that operate in South Australia. But you're right in saying it's one-off in terms of their operations in South Australia. So that's what's creating. Just quickly on this, Bruce. Because there are a number of issues now that are stacking up for weather all there in South Australia. His election's in March next year.
Yeah.
Power prices, of course, a big issue in South Australia. I mean, what do you think of the prospects of Labor getting another term there?
Well, they're going to be tough, David, and because, as Grahame pointed out, they've been in there for a long time. 2002, Labor was elected under Mike Rann, and I worked on that campaign as well.
Long time.
So that's a while back.
Yeah.
And in some ways, they were probably lucky to win the last election because the Abbott government was so much on the nose. So at some stage, your luck runs out, and the redistribution apparently didn't help them at all. But on this specific issue, I think having this thing blocked is probably the best thing that could happen to Labor, because I don't think it was a good thing for them to have contemplated in the first place.
All right.
They never were.
Bruce, I'm not sure if you can still hear me, but I've lost my connection to.
I can't hear Bruce either.
Grahame. All right. Look, apologies for that. We might get someone, if they can, to work on those connections for us. I think it's here at our end. But look, in the meantime, let's turn to the federal election. It's 12 months on since the federal election, and there's been a lot of reflections over the weekend about what's going on in the Liberal Party and so on. But Grahame, let me ask you: when you look back at this 12 months, think back 12 months ago, it was a difficult night, that election night for Malcolm Turnbull in many ways, just scraped over the line. Has it been the year of delivery that he's been talking about over the weekend?
Well, can I start with the first one? And that is, he actually won. Menzies, Fraser, Howard, Abbott, Gorton. So he's one of only 6 people, Liberals, who have won. And I can tell you, at one stage there, under Prime Minister Abbott, the coalition was not going to win. Wasn't even close. The women's vote had walked away en masse, weren't coming back. So he won. Not as spectacularly as he might have, say, 6 months earlier. Look, the upside is that he's been able to deal with the Senate. And I think we all thought that this was going to be a cow of a Senate. As it's turned out, with the Prime Minister, Matthias Cormann and others, they've been able to work with the 10 crossbenchers, and that's been good. So education, childcare, defence, visas, there's infrastructure. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's been done. But strangely, and I think this sort of proves a point again, all of those people who believe the adage that sort of good policy makes good politics, I think we've proved in the last 12 months that you can have good policy, but it often doesn't count in the political game.
Well, that's a good point, and perhaps we'll come back to it. But Bruce, how would you characterise the last 12 months? And I suppose not just for the government, but for Labor as well. What do you think have been perhaps the highs and the lows of this at this 1-year anniversary of last year's election?
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me okay? I've got a feeling you can't hear me, but I'll push on. Look, I think undoubtedly the strongest performer for Labor has been Tony Abbott. He's really helped hugely for the Labor Party, and I think he'll continue to do so. From the other side of politics, I think on the government side, Matthias Cormann has done a pretty good job, as ironically has Christopher Pyne. I mean, you look at the good news stories that have come out for the government in the last little while. They've all been around the contracts to build the ships in South Australia. So despite the fact that he glitched badly at that meeting in Sydney recently, he has been a strong performer. For Labor on the upside, well, it's been all because I think of the appalling split between the Conservatives and the Liberals inside the Liberal Party, and also the failure of our friend, the Prime Minister, to really define himself in any particular way.
Well, and to that point, though, that Grahame makes about good policy, usually the adage is good policy leads to good politics, but that hasn't always been the case. Grahame, perhaps tease that out for us. Why? Why have we seen such bad politics?
Look, I think if you look at the lows, I think that gives you the reason, is that there is still... There's been a rise in this sort of factionalism business. And you know, a very small group of the sort of I wish people. You know, I wish I was still running it. I wish I was Prime Minister. I wish we were doing this. That has hurt, and that's sad. But there's also something about communication nowadays that people in 30 seconds say, fixed education. Oh, yeah? Well, so you should. But what have you done this afternoon? There's a lot of that, yes, let's move on. And they're moving on very quickly and getting either the media or the electorate to focus on things for more than 24 hours.
How to sell something, how to sell a reform. Yeah,
maybe the Prime Minister ought to go and wrestle somebody and put it on Twitter and we'd all focus on it.
All right, let's look at this issue of party reform, because, Bruce, I know we've spoken about this over the years in the Labor Party, and Tony Abbott now championing the idea of plebiscites for pre-selecting candidates. What do you think about that idea? I know you've been a fan of some of the changes, indeed, that Kevin Rudd put in place to democratise the leadership selection process. When it comes to pre-selection, though, should the members of the party have the total say?
Well, in New South Wales, the Labor Party, essentially that is the case. There are circumstances where a local pre-selection can be overridden, but they're becoming increasingly rare. Once upon a time, they were pretty regular, but now they're very rare. So, you know, Labor has gone down that path of saying, well, we will entrust the selection of the local candidate to the local members of the party. I don't think there's anything particularly radical about that at all. And I don't think the Prime Minister really does himself any good by basically not wholeheartedly embracing that and making sure it happens. He could neutralise a lot of what Abbott's on about now just by saying, well, let's make that happen. And, you know, look, it's basic democracy. I think that political parties these days have to go a lot further. They have to give the rank and file much more say if they want to build their parties, if they want to avoid becoming just the party of a political elite or the insiders. Now, there are pitfalls associated with that. And you could argue very strongly that Corbyn in the UK is an example of the Labor Party going far too far and allowing basically anybody to have a say in their election of a leader. But the trend should be towards democratising the party and building up your base, making yourself less reliant on corporate and union donations in order to support the future of the party. And the success of the party. That's the way I see the future of the party.
And Grahame, there are risks with it. I mean, you know, you look at the sort of candidates that come out of open democratic processes like Donald Trump. Jeremy Corbyn's another example of it. But they tend to do reasonably well come election time as a result. What do you think about this idea?
Well, I hate it for plebiscite for your leader. But for candidates, I think it's a terrific idea. And I find it really odd. Former Prime Minister Abbott, former Prime Minister Howard, current Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull in New South Wales, they all agree. And yet, and that's for New South Wales. All three of them from New South Wales think there should be plebiscites to select candidates, and they can't get it up. You know, there are some, you know, almost professional grubs in the New South Wales division of the Liberal Party who wield power and will not want this to change. And when you think about it, all it is, yeah, all right, so you get some branch stacking. Well, so what? The whole point of politics is about numbers. You go out and you get people to support you. Terrific idea.
Look, yeah, the truth is you can also avoid branch stacking. You can put in measures which basically trigger a hold on local rank and file pre-selections if it looks like.
But you have to be a member for a certain period or turn up to certain events and get involved to show you're not just not just signed up by someone to get your vote. Look, final one. I want to get your thoughts on Donald Trump because well, let's have a look at this tweet that's created such a storm. Now, look, for those who haven't followed this, the video is actually pre-presidency, a real video of Donald Trump doing an event there for WWF, superimposing the CNN logo. He's now tweeted it out, this video. Grahame, we've heard your interesting commentary on Trump's presidency from time to time. What have you made of this?
Well, I would like to believe that America could reinvent a sense of humour and treat this the way it was meant. But it's not going to happen. And there's no doubt that this business of, is the president demeaning the office? Well, I can't think of any leader in the world who would do even half of what this video does. And he's got the other problem of the constitutional stuff about freedom of the press. Look, I hope everyone will laugh at it, but I suspect in the end his own troops will absolutely love it. A quarter of the electorate will hate it, and the others say, who cares?
Yeah, I mean, we've got this statement from CNN. They're saying it's a sad day when the President of the United States encourages violence against reporters. Clearly, Sarah Huckabee Sanders lied, that's the press secretary, when she said the President had never done so. Instead of preparing for his overseas trip, his first meeting with Putin, dealing with North Korea and so on, he's instead involved in juvenile behaviour far below the dignity of the office. We'll keep doing our jobs. He should start doing his. Now, Bruce, hard to disagree that it's juvenile and perhaps beneath the dignity of the office. But is it seriously encouraging violence against journalists, or is this just a bit of a joke?
Look, I don't think it will be taken by journalists generally as a call to attack them physically. Notwithstanding some feelings along those lines myself from time to time, but the reality is that this will just feed his base. It will distract the electorate in America and the media to some extent from other issues. And if he is ever to be removed as president before the next election, it'll be because there'll be hard evidence that he has engaged in conduct which would amount to a high crime or misdemeanour under the Constitution and allow the Congress to impeach and try him. That's the only way I think it's going to happen, not with these sorts of stunts. This is what America's just going to have to put up with for the foreseeable future. The real test will be whether he actually has done things which would land him in real trouble before the Congress under the Constitution.
But with a tackle like that, maybe he should be in the State of Origin team.
All right, on that note, we better go. Grahame, Bruce, good to see you both. We'll catch up again next week. Thanks very much for that. We'll take a quick break.